Hi, welcome to the Reboot Loading Podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie.
Hello, everyone. On today's episode, I am speaking with Bryan Schmanske. He is a native of Ann Arbor, Michigan, a former logistics analyst who is looking for his next opportunity. He's an identical twin, and in his spare time, he spends time with his wife, pets, and he likes snowboarding and playing golf. I'm excited to talk to him. So welcome, Bryan, to the Reboot Loading Podcast.
Thanks, Stephanie. Appreciate you having me on here. I've been looking forward to this. Yeah, and as you said, I'm Bryan Schmanske. Currently, I've been laid off for about 3 months, and this is my first experience going through this. So yeah, it's been a lot of ups and downs, but it's definitely been a learning experience. So I'm looking forward to chatting with you about it today.
Bryan, I'm excited to talk to you and hear about your experiences so far within looking for a job, being laid off, the job market as a whole, kind of what you've gone through, and talk about what you're really looking forward to in your next opportunity.
Yeah, so, as you mentioned, and as I mentioned, to start, it's my first time going through a layoff, and it's been a lot of ups and downs. Never really had to look for work before. I've always been fully employed since I graduated from school. So yeah, it's just a lot of new territory for me and my family. But, most of my experience previously was in the automotive manufacturing space. I worked for a couple tier one suppliers to the automotive company. As you know, the big three's pretty big up here in Detroit. There was a lot of opportunity out of school for that. So yeah, I spent a lot of time in the operational space for those companies, and then COVID hit and everything changed. Obviously looking for my next opportunity in, I don't know what kind of space I'm looking for right now. Probably staying away from the automotive industry. It's very chaotic, and I've been there, done that. Don't know if I want to go back there. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, it's hard to figure out what direction to go to. I think after a layoff, at least this has been my case, of not understanding really what I want to be when I grow up. I mean, it's as simple as that. I'm like, I have so much under my belt. I have so many different hats I've worn throughout my career, and I'm just like, what's next? There's another adventure out there, so let's figure it out.
Like you said, you've worn many hats. I've worn many hats too. And I think my goal is to, not start over in a new industry. I would kind of like to try to make a lateral move, something that's easy to get into, something that I already have knowledge with, and I don't have to start building up from the ground up again within a company.
With the way that the job market's been and the horror stories and the various ups and downs that I've heard from so many people, how has your experience been with applying for jobs? Have you been primarily looking for remote positions or hybrid or a little bit of everything?
So the job search, it's been a roller coaster. Lately, I've been relating it to like a bad video game where you make it through all of the levels and then you get to the final boss and you can't beat the final boss, and then you start back at level 1. So that's kind of like how I've been feeling lately. It's been a roller coaster. I'll have good weeks where I'm feeling really positive. I got some stuff in the pipeline, and then I'll have other weeks like this week. I woke up on Monday. I was feeling really positive about a position that I, had a final interview with the hiring managers, and they decided to go another direction. That's actually my third instance of that happening since I've been laid off. I've been lucky enough to have interviews for some really good positions, and, making it to the final rounds, it just makes you feel good that, you still have some valuable skills to bring. But ultimately, I've been turned away to those jobs because they've gone with other people who have in-industry experience. That's kind of a hard pill to swallow because I know what kind of person I am. I'm a quick learner. I'm easy to adapt to things. And, I know a lot of companies, they look at the onboarding process, how much it's going to cost, and they could see possibly me being more of a higher cost of onboarding because I might not know some of the systems. But what they don't know about me, though, is that I'm a quick learner and I'm really motivated to get that done. So, yeah, it's just, like I said, it's been a struggle. Some of the good that's come out of it, I've been able to network with some people that I made connections with, which has been really good. And they've been trying to help me, give me leads on positions they think I'd be a good fit for and stuff. So that's been good. But, some of the bad, the relationships that I had at a lot of those relationships were personal relationships. And then, when the layoff happened, it's like those relationships just got cut off. And to me personally, that hurts. And I'm just being real about that, because just because you get laid off from somewhere doesn't mean you're still not that same person. You're still that same person. You just need a job. Like navigating like all those emotions and stuff on top of like having to think about my family's financial situation and getting back into the workforce so I can support them. Battling those two things it's been challenging, but keeping myself busy, that's what I've been doing. I have a great chart that I keep with all the jobs I apply to, what I've followed up with, do I have an in there, have I met with any of the employees. So it's a good tracker that I have going, but it's becoming very overwhelming because the tracker is just sitting there not making any progress. We're just adding more opportunities to it.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. I have an Excel spreadsheet that has multiple tabs on there of positions I've applied for, places I've applied to, recruiters I've talked to. I mean, it has everything. It's like the craziest spreadsheet I think I've ever done in my life. And I love Excel and spreadsheets. So it's color coded and it's crazy.
The job search today is so tailored around that resume and keywords in the resume. And is it going to make it through the AI screening for the keywords? I understand why companies are doing it, because they get so many applicants for one position. That's another point. Everyone says the economy and the job market is great. It may be great for some sectors and for some occupations, but for people that are in the supply chain and the tech world, it is not great right now. There are layoffs happening every day, every week. So it does get frustrating being in this position and then having people tell me like, oh, there's tons of jobs out there. There may be, but there's not tons of jobs for me. If I want to completely take a 180 from where I'm at right now and go be a police officer, sure, I'm sure I could get hired on right away, but that's not my passion. That's not what I want to do. So that's been really difficult. Picking and choosing which jobs you should apply for. It also becomes very daunting. You see a job that's been posted for like one day and there's already 100 or 200 applicants. That's very discouraging. And it's like, what can I do to make myself stand out from that? Do you reach out to the recruiter? If you know that recruiter, or if you see who the recruiter is. I mean, yeah, we can do that, but I feel like there's so many people out there that are just inundating these recruiters with messages trying to introduce themselves that it might not come off in a good way, just because they get so many. So I'm just trying to learn how to navigate that and really just kind of understand where I'm going.
It's tough to do all the things that you're talking about, keeping track of things, networking, knowing what to do. There's so much advice out there from all different directions, career coaches, resume writers, consulting firms, and all of the above. And some of them are telling you all the right things, but it feels like even if we follow their advice, or even if we're looking to what they're saying to do, had consultations with career coach, right? And he gave very good advice in different things. And then I would go take to LinkedIn articles, social media, talking to other people, and everyone else has different pieces of information that they'll give you and say, oh no, you should be doing this. And it's really a matter of like, who's telling me the right thing? And maybe it's all right. And it's just, we have to have it fall in front of the right people. But it is a lot to take on, especially when you're juggling the emotional aspect of being unemployed. And that was something I wanted to kind of talk about a little more, is just the emotional piece, and what are some of the things that you've done to help you process and deal with those feelings of being laid off?
So yeah, the emotional part of it has been really big for me, because like I said at the beginning of this is my first layoff I've ever had to go through. One, how the layoff happened, just a blind Zoom meeting kind of a thing, 7 minutes being told like it's nothing done on your part. We just need to make, better decisions kind of a thing. That was just cold to me. I would have rather heard it coming from my direct manager, something like that, somebody who I had daily contact with to communicate those messages to me. That would have been better. So like that's been really hard for me, and I still feel that very strongly. But some of the things that I've been trying to do to help myself. Got a couple friends that were laid off as well that I'm still close to, and we vent to each other. And anytime I'm having a hard time, I'll shoot them a text message, and we just kind of chit chat about things and stuff. So that's been helping. But I'm also I take comfort in knowing that like I'm not the only one going through this. There's a lot of people that are going through this, but in addition to that as well, I also take comfort in knowing that some of the people that I might have been slighted by in the past, or some of what I thought some of my strong connections were there, but maybe bridges were burned. I'm not like sinking a lot of my feelings into that anymore
Mm-hmm.
because there's nothing that I can do. I can really control what I do. Like I said, I'm taking comfort in knowing that, like, today's employees and or managers, they're going to be tomorrow's candidates as well.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, like some of us will probably be in this position again. And a lot of what I'm taking from this is I'm going to remember how I felt going through this. And if I'm ever in a position of power in the future, I want to make sure that people that I oversee or manage or lead never feel this way. I have my hobbies and stuff. I keep myself busy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get too caught up in the job search because there's only so many applications I can put in during the day. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with that.
Yeah, it's a tough road to navigate. And like you said, that, the managers will be a candidate one day. And that's so true because we've seen that happen too within just our own layoffs. And I totally get what you're saying as far as you wish that, and this happens in a lot of companies, and I've seen this repeatedly happening where, when they do have these mass layoffs, you're not hearing it from the person that you've made more of a personal connection with. You're hearing it from somebody who's farther up the ladder that you probably have never met in person or met at all, spoken to one-on-one. And it seems very impersonal at that point, which, companies will argue and say, hey, yeah, we're doing it this way because of whatever reasons. But at the same time, we're humans and we strive for having some of that closure, some of that personal interaction, unless you're completely, antisocial and don't want any of that. I mean, that's okay too. But a lot of people do need to have that closure from their immediate manager or, someone that they've worked closer with. So I can definitely relate there in understanding. I've heard so many stories, and I've also experienced it myself with the number of interviews that a lot of companies are having, these multiple rounds, sometimes 5, 6 rounds. I think the most I've heard of is like 9 rounds. So it seems like the process has been more elaborate these days as far as what they're looking for in candidates and kind of all those hoops that we're having to jump through to get to the end goal, which is to get hired. Have you experienced any of these type of situations where you've had more than 1 or 2 rounds of an interview or had to do some crazy things like, I don't know, write an essay or anything along those lines?
Yeah, so I can definitely touch on a few of those. I've been applying for jobs since, the day I got laid off started that afternoon, pretty much. And I've been fortunate enough to land a few interviews. So going through the phone screen with the initial recruiter and then on to, usually the hiring manager, that's where the next step, at least what I found, that's where it's been going. And those interviews with the recruiter, it's just a basic phone screen asking about your qualifications, and then they tell you more about the job. But when you get to the hiring manager one, it's a more technical interview, and they're asking those situational questions to see, how you're going to react and how you carry yourself. And I feel, at least in that interview, you can get a really good idea of if you want to hire that person or not. I think anything more than 3 interviews, including that one with the recruiter, I think that's a little much, especially for positions that aren't for a senior level or above. And when I say senior level or above, I mean management position, C-level people, stuff like that. It's just becoming very cumbersome. And preparing for the interviews also has become very daunting as well because, you kind of have to tailor your message to each position. One interview that comes to mind, it was more of an entry level position. The recruiter really liked me. And, I got to the second round of interview and it was with the gentleman I was going to be replacing and then the hiring manager. And, we had a good conversation. Felt like all my skills were up to snuff with what they were asking for. I think I waited 4 or 5 weeks with multiple follow-ups to the recruiter. And the recruiter's response was always, the hiring team is still making a decision. Hiring team is still making a decision. We're hoping to get back to you soon. And I ended up getting the response 5 weeks later, letting me know that they went with another person that had some in-industry experience. To me, like, we didn't need to wait a whole month and a half to
Right.
do that. I thought that was not really fair to me. Like, if you were really like that much on the fence about hiring me, you probably could have told me a little bit sooner. The other frustrating thing about that job posting was after I got the rejection phone call from the recruiter, I ended up logging onto their website and that job had been reposted a couple weeks prior. And I kind of wish I would have caught it at that point because then I could have reached out to the recruiter and been like, hey, I noticed that this got reposted. Is there anything I can try to clarify? Unfortunately, I didn't do that. So that was a long run for one position that I ended up not getting. It was very frustrating.
That
Yeah.
was one of the things I was going to talk about is that I feel like, and I've experienced this as well, that a lot of the process, even if you're not having multiple rounds, it's just taking a lot longer in between your rounds of interviews or in between your first contact, your conversations and all of that to get any sort of responses or traction. And I know I've heard from others saying like, yes, it's because they have so many to weed through. But from the candidate's perspective, you're looking at, let's say, even if they have like 20 people that they're narrowing it down to, I mean, they're not interviewing all thousands of people that are applying to certain jobs. They're not even looking at that many. It's significantly less that they're even looking at and then pushing them through after those initial screens. So from the candidate side, it's hard to understand why there's such a lag in communication and the timing there. And it's just another thing that's adding on to the stress of going through the process of being unemployed after a layoff. Doesn't do well for the mental health. I'll tell you
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't know if you experienced this, or where you've made it with your interviews and stuff, but at least for me personally, when I invest all that time into an interview and then make it to the final round and feel really good about it, and then I get that rejection, at least for me, that hits really hard. It's hard for me not to feel those emotions because I get my hopes up. And I finally think like, all right, this is going to be the breakthrough. But like I said, at the beginning, I'm relating this to a bad video game at this point. It's like you make it through all the levels, you're doing well, and then you get to the final boss and you just have to start over. I think the timing is one very frustrating thing. I also think, some of the asks during the interviews are becoming a little much.
I was going to say, what's the craziest thing that you've been asked to do, like where it just doesn't match up with what the job was?
Yeah, sure thing. So I applied for a entry level position, had the first phone screen, things went great, had the second interview with the hiring manager, things went, I felt pretty well. When I got to the end of that second interview, I asked, what the next steps were going to be. And she went on to tell me that there was going to be a case study and then there would be a panel interview with 3 or 4 other people. And remind you, it's for a entry level position. Now, ultimately, I didn't get called back to proceed on to the next steps for that. I'm kind of thankful for that, but that's probably the craziest one that I've heard, to be honest with you. The other one, though, that I've had that was kind of off the wall, and I actually kind of liked it. When applying for when applying just for one job, I found they didn't want my resume. They didn't want me to fill out an application. They literally just wanted me to write an essay on what I found interesting about the company, what value could I bring to it, and why I was interested in it. And I still haven't heard anything back from those guys, but I just thought it was a very interesting interview process. Instead of, putting it through the AI reader for the resume to see if there's any keywords in there, I don't think the resume really tells the true story because, as you mentioned before, there's so many suggestions on what to do with each resume. It definitely highlights, career achievement skills and, what kind of value you can bring to a organization. But I think you actually need to like sit down and talk with a person to get to know who they are and will they fit with the culture and the team. Relating back to that bad video game, the first level is the resume and getting it through some kind of screener to make sure there's enough keywords in there. But one other thing I wanted to mention though, I have come across some really good ones, at least in the job search. I was on a company's website yesterday, and in the career section, they actually had a section where you could upload your resume and their AI would read it and it would pop out the most relevant jobs that they had available. And I thought that was one of the coolest things I've ever seen. to be able to, kind of filter based on, what your resume says for the right opportunities for you. That was really cool. And it made it a lot easier. And I wish a lot of other companies would go that way.
Yeah, versus the you log in and there's or each one that you apply to, you have to create a login and then you get sent to some, I don't know, I think Workday is probably the most common one. And you have to create
Yeah.
a new login every time, and that's always fun.
And honestly, like when I see that the application process is just like ridiculously long, sometimes I even shy away from just applying for it. Like that's just kind of where I'm at with it. Like I look at it and I'm like, oh, you pretty much just want me to write my whole resume in here, kind of a thing. And at that point, I don't even want to do it. I lose interest.
Yeah,
So
I do
yeah,
the same with cover letters. So if a cover letter is mandatory, I'm just like, nah, moving
yeah,
on.
yeah,
There's so
exactly.
because I already know at this point it's probably not worth my time going through all of that just to apply here, where my chances are pretty slim. And
Yeah.
so yeah, I just move on. But I want to ask you, like, if you could do anything, didn't have to worry about money or anything at all, like, what would be your absolute dream job?
Just something outside, to be honest with you. Just something I honestly like I've always told my wife this. If we live close to like a mountain town, I would just go be a snowboard instructor, to be honest with you. I would just go live in the mountains and just shred all day. That's what I would do. Like that's what I do to kind of like relieve my stress when I'm snowboarding. I don't think about anything else. It's just me out there in my own little head. And I actually did a lot of that when I got laid off. It gave me the time to be able to go do that. So I spent a lot of time up north,
Mm-hmm.
Michigan, during the last couple months, just working on myself, knowing that the stress of having to find a job is still there, but also enjoying this time that I have off. This situation doesn't all have to be negative. And that's kind of how I'm taking it. I've talked to a couple people and, they asked me how I'm doing. And honestly, I'm doing okay. I wake up every day, try to have a good attitude. I know that the next great opportunity is right around the corner. So I'm taking this time to enjoy my hobbies when I can because, when I'm fully engulfed in work, I don't have a lot of that time. So yeah, I've just been enjoying it and enjoying time with my wife and my family. My animals mean the world to me. So, I have an older senior dog, so I'm spending a lot of time with him. Like I said, this doesn't have to be a negative experience. I'm not taking it as a negative experience. It's just a opportunity for a new door to open.
Yeah. And it's hard to see the positive in things like this, though. It's definitely a learning process. For me, I have had the ups and downs, the highs and lows, ran the whole gamut of all the emotions. And at the end of the day, I feel like it's a lot like the reviews that you read online. When you go out to, let's say, Amazon and you're looking to buy a product and you've got, let's say the thing averages out to be like 4 stars, right? But you've got some 2 stars in there and you've got some 1 stars in there, but you've got some 5 stars, right? That's kind of how my days are. So some days are 2 star days, some days are 5 star days, but they all average out to be, I would say, a solid 4. It is important, like you said, like to have something that you can just take your mind off of things. Go out, do your
Yeah.
snowboarding.
I think for my next opportunity, like the most important thing for me, like what I'm really looking for is I want to work for a company that's making an impact. That's something that I've kind of learned about myself. I don't want to work for a company that's just, worried about making money. I want to work for a company that is making an impact environmentally or in people's lives. So I've been looking, at a lot of medical technology companies, renewable energy companies, things like that. Those are things that really interest me and what I'm looking for. So hoping I can find an opportunity in that space at some point. If it doesn't come along right away, I'll just keep looking.
Awesome. I foresee a good future for you as far as finding what you want. I've had a conversation recently with someone about finding a company that really aligns with what you're wanting. So finding something that gets you pumped for the day, gets you feeling energized, like you really just want to go in and do your work, that makes you happy with what you're doing. One of the last questions I have for you is just for someone who's in a similar situation as yourself and out looking and they've just recently been laid off, what type of advice would you give to them to, like, if you could do this all over again, And with the knowledge that you have now, what would you do differently?
Yeah, so first would be, if you go through a layoff that isn't ideal, you don't get to talk to the people that you want to talk to, or you don't get that opportunity. I would say, like, don't take it personal. It's really hard not to do that, but most of the people that you had a day-to-day connection with didn't have any decision in this. So try not to harbor like the bad feelings, even though it is. Like, don't take it personal. But second would be just give yourself the time. That's something I didn't really do the first couple days. When I found out I was being laid off, told my wife, and we were immediately started applying for jobs. And I don't think that was necessarily the most healthy thing to do. And, after about a couple of days of that, we got to the weekend and I was like, I just need a break. I need to process this. And I did for a couple of weeks. I didn't get on LinkedIn. I didn't search for any kind of jobs. I wasn't reading the news about the job outlook and stuff like that. I really just gave myself that time just to kind of process, recenter myself, just get my head straight before jumping in. So, like I said, probably the two biggest things of advice would be, don't take anything personally, and also give yourself that time. It's really important.
Yeah, that's good advice. The time piece right there, that is something I wish I would have done differently as well, because I think once you're in that position that you want to jump in so quickly, because it's a very uneasy position to be in. And you just feel like you're doing something if you're jumping headfirst back into applying for jobs. And that can lead to a lot of this delay in processing the emotions that come along with a layoff. And I kept saying, oh yeah, I'm going to take some time for myself. And what that equated to was basically me applying for jobs and then sitting and watching something on Netflix and then going and applying to more jobs. And so I never really took that time to just absorb everything. So that's definitely something I would have done differently. And I think also you touched on earlier, it's important to have a friend, a group, just some sort of confidant that you can go to when you're feeling stressed out. Someone that you can actually talk to and help you just work out what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, you don't even need them to give you the answers or anything, just somebody to listen to, just to somebody hear your thoughts and, not be judgmental back towards them. And, somebody who will just really let you vent and just get out what you need to do. I think that's really, really important.
I agree. Well, Bryan, I want to thank you so much for joining me and talking to me about some of the struggles that you've had, your experiences so far. I do wish you all of the best of luck in your continued job search. I will have your LinkedIn information down in the show notes. If anyone is interested in contacting Bryan, networking with him via LinkedIn, reaching out for him for any open positions, please do so. And Bryan, I wanted to ask you if you would be interested in coming back and talking with me once you've found your next opportunity, and we can kind of talk about everything that had happened since and look at the things that are happening that are new for you.
Yeah, I would love to come back and chat with you after finding a position. I think this has been great, and I look forward to it.
Awesome.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
If you're interested in becoming a guest on my show, all the information on how to contact me is available in the show notes. Would love to speak with other laid-off individuals, mental health professionals, recruiters, business and career coaches, and resume writers. Also, if you're enjoying the content and would like a shout out in an upcoming episode, a link in how you can support this podcast is available in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time.